What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. We got an international game to preview: the 2-1 Pittsburgh Steelers versus the 2-1 Minnesota Vikings in Ireland. 9:30 a.m. kickoff for me. Just curious on the community's perspective on these international games on Sunday. Do you guys like them? Do you hate them? Are you indifferent? I mean, for me, this is kind of the ideal weekend of football. We got some great college games going on all day on Saturday. Fernando Mendoza later against Iowa, and then we get Dante Moore against Penn State. Some big tests for some big time quarterbacks that I've enjoyed watching so far this season. So I'll be locked into those. On Sundays, I usually try to get up around, before sunrise and go try to run, get that knocked out of the way. But with the Steelers playing so early, I feel like I'll have, kind of the rest of the day to kind of watch some other games and just kind of kick back and relax, not work as much. So yeah, just kind of curious on, do y'all like these games being this early or not? But starting with the injury report, Joey Porter Jr., Jonnu Smith, both questionable in this one. Jaylen Warren, according to Adam Schefter, is going to be good to go. No Alex Highsmith once again, so Nick Herbig will get the start in his place. Porter working back from the soft tissue injury, man, it would be like really, really nice to be able to get him back on the field. I know that they want to be extremely cautious about rushing him back too early because you don't want him to re-aggravate something. But with Jordan Addison coming back from his suspension this week, it would be a really big help, having him out there on the boundary against the Vikings. But we'll see. I lean towards him not playing, and I think that Jonnu will probably play. He was a kind of a later add, I think, to the injury report this week. Kind of on the Viking side, no J.J. McCarthy. He had a really rough go of it through the first 2 weeks of the season. Carson Wentz started last week. Andrew Van Ginkel is probably the most notable absence from Minnesota's perspective. Van Ginkel is a really interesting player, kind of a hybrid guy that's been with Flores for quite a while now. He's an edge rusher who can get after the quarterback, but he also does some really nice things dropping into coverage. I actually think he's one of the best defenders probably in the entire NFL at just being able to identify and read out screens and things of that nature. So he can drop into coverage. He's kind of a key, chess piece for what Flores, kind of how he likes to think about defense. So him being out is definitely big. I don't think it's going to change anything from his perspective in terms of what they're going to do schematically, but it is a big loss. And then their rookie left guard, Donovan Jackson, who I thought had some good moments last week on film, he's going to be out in this one as well. So just before we get started, I went back and watched basically all of the games for the Vikings so far this season. Offense, defense, all that stuff. I got a bunch of scouting notes that I kind of want to get to on both sides of the ball. Just before we get started, if you guys could do me a favor, subscribe, hit the bell, all that stuff. Drop me a comment. Let me know your predictions for the game. Questions, comments, concerns, all that stuff is greatly appreciated on my end. Definitely helps the YouTube algorithm and gets this thing out to as many people as possible. I tend to watch a lot of Vikings games in general. I'm just a really big fan of this coaching staff. I just think that they're really bright people that you can learn a lot from. Kevin O'Connell, one of the best in the biz. I think what he does better than anyone else in the league, in my opinion, is being able to scheme things up in the intermediate area of the field, especially over the middle. This is a really tough matchup for the Steelers on paper from an X's and O's standpoint. We'll kind of get into the reasons why that is, some areas that they could potentially pick at. But NFL defenses have generally been terrified of playing the Vikings, single high. For obvious reasons, right? They have Justin Jefferson. He's been a phenomenal player really since he stepped foot on an NFL field, but he sees more targeted coverage more than anyone else in the league. And when I say that, I mean teams playing cover two to his side, whether it's quarter, half, or if he's on the quarter side, it's they're going to leave that backside safety at home to try to get really. What most teams are trying to do is they want to get two sets of eyes on Justin Jefferson at all times, just because there's not really anybody in the league that's going to be able to cover him one-on-one out there on an island. Minnesota, they hammer cover one, cover three really better than anyone. If you look at some of their numbers last year, even with Sam Darnold, who's a reclamation project of O'Connell's, they averaged 9.7 yards per attempt through the air and threw a touchdown on 7.7% of their dropbacks. Both of those were the best in the NFL. Obviously, the Steelers, one of the I think they're play the second most single high in the entire NFL. Cover one, cover three, dominant. So this is going to be, a really strong test for them. I think the Steelers are typically, when they go into matchups like this, they're kind of more of the mind frame of we do what we do. We're going to try to like just be better. I don't anticipate that they're going to blink and try to do a bunch of different stuff. We'll see. Maybe they could surprise us with some adjustments, but it is really tough. One of the concepts that O'Connell really likes is called wave. So basically, what it is like, say you got two receivers on the right side of the field, and then one usually from a condensed split on the opposite side. They just run these like double crossers over the middle of the field. It's very similar to the touchdowns that the Steelers allowed in week 1 and week 2 to Garrett Wilson and to Torrey Horton. And then the other receiver on the right side will end up running kind of like a deep post normally, which is kind of like a quarters alert if you get that. So just kind of be on the lookout for that. Carson Wentz going to get the ball again in this one due to injury. Wentz has started, almost 100 games in his career with a 500 record. So he's experienced. He just hasn't played very much really since his stint with the Commanders. I think that was 2022. He was with the Colts in 2021. Really just like minimal playing time since then. But, my thoughts on Carson, I just think that he's always been a really chaotic player. I think that some of the numbers you can look at kind of bear that out as well. You look at Pro Football Focus, they got – for his career, he has 155 big time throws, but he's got 142 turnover worthy plays. So that's just kind of like the roller coaster that is Carson Wentz. Just watching his film last week, I think that KOC did trust him a little bit. They came out, did some interesting things. I thought he showed good understanding and command of the offense. He ripped a sweet, high low, this kind of like wrap in to Justin Jefferson on his first drop back where they ended up identifying the hook player. The hook player jumped up towards this little grab route, and he ripped something with the anticipation over the middle of the field. I'm expecting to see them spam some easy buttons in this one as well. I think that they'll probably look at some ways to get him on the move the launch point, some play action bootlegs, probably some screens, maybe a little bit more of that, especially with the Steelers' tendency to bring pressure. But he also ran himself into a couple sacks. Was probably fortunate not to turn the ball over as well. So, that's kind of one of the things with Carson. It's just like you're going to get the chance to accumulate some negative plays with him, just the way that he plays. I would also keep an eye out with ball security with him. I think he kind of colored between the lines last week for the most part and got the ball out quick, like 2.6, 2.7 time to throw. That's the way to get after this Steelers defense. You got to get the ball out before the edge rushers can really, start getting up the field and in the pocket. But he's really, really loose with the ball when he's trying to, play, make, and extend. And sometimes he can get, a little overextended in that regard. So just keep an eye on that. Justin Jefferson, already mentioned him a little bit, but like he's just a magical fit for this offense. I think they've designed everything perfectly around his very unique skill set. They move him around the formation. It's, he plays X, he plays flanker, he plays in the slot. Really special player. I just don't think he really has like any weaknesses. He can go up and high point the ball. He's a route running savant. I don't think he gives defenders like any sort of indicators before the break point. Just a really difficult cover. I think what sets him apart from really anyone else in the league, and why I say it's a really like just seamless fit between him and like what O'Connell have done, like designing the offense, is like the lower body flexibility and his ability to explode out of his cuts. It's just unlike anything that I've really ever seen at the position. They get Jordan Addison back. Addison was kind of surprising last year. One thing that I remembered about like how he played was he was catching a bunch of like really tough plays in the air, going up and high pointing the ball, like playing through contact. I just didn't think that he was going to – I liked Addison coming out of college. I just didn't think he was going to be that caliber of player. But you look at it, he caught 12 of his 22 contested targets last season. That's pretty freaking awesome, man, for a guy of his size. He's also scored 19 touchdowns. So that's kind of one of the things that he's the beneficiary of teams, throwing so much attention at Justin Jefferson. And that's kind of one of the questions about like how the Steelers are going to defend these guys is, is it going to be Jalen Ramsey? Like if you're playing cover 1, cover 3, I do think it's probably a good idea just to go ahead and have Ramsey follow him, especially if Porter can't play in this one. But then you do kind of leave yourself open to a little bit of, Addison. I wouldn't necessarily say he's like a speedster, but he can definitely, like he can threaten and win vertically. So he can win at all 3 levels. So you're going to have to make sure that Slay's able to hold up and not allow those explosive plays. I thought the Steelers defense last week did some good things on the back end as well and made some plays. It's just there's still more work to be done. I think that's the thing about the script is like, do they still blitz as much? Can the vets hold up on the back end? We'll see with that. But even in addition to those guys that I mentioned, like Jaylen Naylor is kind of a reserve player for them. He's another guy who can get down the field vertically as well. And they got Adam Thielen in the slot, who's kind of like him and Hawkinson are more of the security blankets who don't see as much volume. But along the offensive line, they get Christian Darrisaw back this week at left tackle. I love Darrisaw as a prospect. He's a really awesome player. Strong anchor, really heavy-handed. I will say that like he is susceptible at times to losing on the outside track. He can give up a short corner on occasion. So that's one of the things to kind of watch. I thought Nick Herbig was fantastic last week. I mean, every time he gets a chance to play in this defense, it seems like he makes splash plays. And he led the Steelers with 6 pressures against the pass. Should have had 2 sacks. But again, I think this is a game where you're going to need some splash plays to come away with a victory. I don't think I'm saying anything that's not like cliche worthy, but that just is the truth. No Donovan Jackson this week. Left guard Cameron Hayward's going to be aligned over there. Going to need him to have a good game. I think he's had a very strong season so far. He's made a lot of impact plays. And then on the right side, TJ Watt gets Brian O'Neill. O'Neill is a interesting player. He's a better run blocker than he is a pass blocker, but he's really good on the move in their zone scheme stuff. He can get downhill as well. He's got pretty good foot speed. I would say with O'Neill, he's a guy that you can push back and compress the pocket against a little bit. So his anchor is a little bit more shaky in contrast to a guy like Darrisaw. So maybe look for Watt to test him early with some speed to power. And maybe if you can compress the pocket and get Carson, his feet, he can get a little bit of what I call like pocket ADHD. You start getting him to move his feet. I think his eyes will drop at pressure and get him rolling out the back door. And then hopefully if you can catch one of those moments where, maybe Herbig wins the outside track, you can get a strip sack or something like that. But they do run zone concepts in the run game about 80% of the time. One of the heaviest leans out there right now through the first 3 weeks. They are second in success rate on those zone plays. I think they're fifth in success rate on gap plays too. So they ran the ball a lot better. Some of that is like facing the Bengals last week, who are not like, I don't think like a real defense right now, especially like up front, the way that they defend the run. So, you're juicing the numbers up a little bit in that regard, but I do think that they were able to access the perimeter fairly easily. Jordan Mason, really solid player. They ended up making a pretty heady trade, I felt like. I'm not a huge fan of Kwesi as a general manager. Just some of the moves he's made over the years have kind of left me scratching my head. But that move in general, I thought was pretty inspired. But he's a guy who's averaged over 5.3 yards per carry throughout his career. So I thought that was – I thought that some of the Steelers' adjustments to the run game last week were really solid. I was impressed with the coaching staff. Saw some run blitzes, saw some more slanting, getting guys working downhill. I think Patrick Queen's been a factor of that. Queen is top 5 right now in run stops among all linebackers. So I think he's been really solid against the run. Some of the stuff in pass coverage has not been as good as it was last year. But with some of the issues they've got on the defensive line, kind of like John Leonard and I were talking about on the Yins No Ball podcast earlier this week, which we made public for everybody for week 3. Just, there are pros and cons to playing like this, but I think like with the personnel they got, if they're going to continue to play Keanu Ben this many snaps, I think, and especially like working Peyton Wilson into the equation, I think that you got to get creative with some of the stuff you're doing inside the box. And we'll see with this one, Derek Harmon week 2. So like, how much does he play in this game? I would anticipate his snap count's going to go up. To me, the question is like, does he jump Keanu Benton right away in terms of like who's playing the most snaps when they're in nickel? That's just something that I'm going to be keeping an eye on. I thought that Harmon was solid last week. There wasn't a ton I thought that you could really extract from the film. But another thing too, like without Aaron Jones in the lineup, so Jones coming from Green Bay, I think everybody who plays like fantasy football probably knows a lot about him, but really good pass catcher. They like to use him out of the backfield a lot, but he's also like extremely reliable in pass protection. So I would keep an eye on, I don't even know if I'm saying his name right, Xavier Scott. He's a third-year player who has played like 10 snaps in his career. He played last week against the Bengals. When he got out there, I had no clue who he was. He was out there can you maybe put a red dot on him in pass protection to maybe spring a big play with some of the way that the Steelers off-ball linebackers can blitz? I'll be interested to see if they can do some of that, maybe get some stunts working, kind of make those guys figure things out on the fly with the backup left guard and maybe a new pass protector. Not that Mason can't do that. I just don't think that they're on the level of like a guy like Aaron Jones who you can really trust to, hold the fourth down back there. Then going to the defensive side of the ball, Brian Flores, really difficult to play against. Simply put, they're number one right now in EPA per play by a significant margin. Some of that's partially boosted by the quarterbacks they played so far. Caleb Williams at week 1 struggled in that game, played a little bit better since. Michael Penix in week 2, I think that he's been pretty brutal on film this season. And then Jake Browning, who's a backup in week 3. So your hope there is that Aaron Rodgers is going to have a better performance than any of those guys, given the experience level and things like that. But they're in base defense a ton. I think the second most base defense snaps in the NFL so far this year, partially because they just have like a lot of hybrid players who can carry out different assignments. I've mentioned Van Ginkel, who's not playing this week, but you got guys like Josh Metellus, who is a safety by like designation on the depth chart, but like he can play in the slot. He can man up against tight ends. He can come down and play in the box. You got Harrison Smith. He's a guy who can, play deep. He can also play in the box. He can blitz. So it's just all up and down their defense. Byron Murphy at corner. He could play inside and outside. So they just value versatility, and it's kind of they found a lot of players that are really good fits for the actual scheme. They play zone coverage 80% of the time, so don't expect a lot of man coverage opportunities. When you get them, you absolutely have to capitalize because they're much better in zone. Their personnel is much better to read the eyes and play with vision on the quarterback. It is a ton of cover 2. It's the cover 2 rate is like over 40%. Sometimes it's like traditional cloud. Sometimes it's more like 2 read, which can play out a little bit more like quarters. The difficult part about this defense is just how much disguise is kind of baked in. There's a lot of pre-snap movement. It forces quarterbacks to do a lot of their work post-snap, and I just think it's really difficult when all these guys are rolling all over the place to handle. Like the Steelers, they blitz a ton, especially on early downs. Pretty much everyone is a threat to come at any given moment, especially if you want to live in those condensed formations. They'll dial up some different things. They don't do a ton of stunting, but one of the things I'm kind of watching for too is like if we see an uptick in that this week, considering like the Steelers interior, in particular, Zach Frazier and Mason McCormick have had a time through the first 3 weeks of the season picking up any form of stunt or game. So that's something that I would be watching for too. Now they will play with mostly a light box that comes with, playing that much cover too, especially on early downs. Like even if you come out in heavy personnel, 12 personnel, 2 tight ends, they will stay in their base and they will play 2 deep safeties and they'll just dare you to run the ball pretty much. So you absolutely have to take advantage of that. The Vikings ended up bringing in former Steeler Javon Hargrave, a lighter pass rusher type. Obviously, as we all know, the Steelers have to find a way to run the football, in my opinion, in order to win this game. The Vikings don't have a ton of weaknesses, pretty much no statistical weaknesses so far this season, but they have allowed 5.0 yards per carry on runs outside the tackle. They've allowed 9 explosive runs. So an explosive run, as categorized by Next Gen, is anything over 10 yards. They've allowed 9 of those. That's the 4th most in the NFL so far. So on the flip side of that, currently the Steelers only have 3 explosive runs on the season, and they're 30th in the NFL with like 2.5 yards per carry outside the tackles. So whoever loses this battle in the trenches as it pertains to the run game, tomorrow they're going to come away feeling pretty bad about themselves, to be honest with you. Jaylen Warren, I think he's been awesome. I think he's seeing the game right now from a zone blocking perspective as good as really he ever has. He broke, I think, 9 tackles last week, maybe against the Patriots. But the Steelers' offensive line just looks fundamentally lost from an assignment standpoint. I mean, there's plenty of plays where it's just like one guy who's just kind of blowing an assignment and kind of screwing things up for everybody, but just way too many run throughs. And then I just think that they're just not working very well in conjunction with each other on their like double teams, especially when they're trying to like run some outside zone stuff, not executing, not being assignment sound. So just need to do a better job of creating more yards before contact for the backs. And we'll see if they're able to do that in this one. I know that Caleb Johnson is certainly in the doghouse. Like I don't even think he played last week, but maybe this week when you know that you're going to have to run the ball in order to win this one, could Johnson maybe get a series in the game to see if you can build his confidence up, to see if he can bring you something in the under center run game? We'll see. You just don't want to become one dimensional against this team. Flores has faced Rodgers multiple times before. He faced Rodgers' Jets offense last year, which is pretty much what the Steelers' shotgun passing offense reminds me of right now. I think Aaron threw 3 picks, forced him into a couple of ill-advised throws. He fooled him a couple of times with some disguised looks. Got a sack on him on a pressure where Aaron didn't realize that he was hot. Threw a pick six to Van Ginkel. So you got to find creative ways to take shots down the field. Like Ben Johnson's like one of the only offensive coordinators that's really been able to I guess I don't even want to say solve that, but kind of solve Flores's defense. And it really is like by just hammering them with the downhill run game and punishing them for playing with those light boxes, and then being able to scheme up some shot plays and hitting the perfect timing, and getting things pushed down the field. And because really this defense is like they're trying to get you to run the ball, and then they're trying to get you to check the ball down. It's like if you just want to live with all these short passes, that's really playing into their hands. So just in terms of the offensive line play in general, I don't think that the offensive line has been great in pass protection. I think some of it has been a little bit overstated. I did the film room on Troy Fautanu, went through all 3 games, 100 reps, I don't know, 60 reps or 70 reps or whatever it was in pass protection. Did a film room breakdown of that already on the channel. So if you haven't watched that, please go check that out for me. I think you guys will really enjoy it. But I think that he's playing pretty well aside from 1 to 2 reps a game. There's some obvious caveats there in terms of the Steelers haven't been able to throw the ball down the field. So it's kind of you're not getting great snapshots of, those individual performances, but they're not giving him in particular a ton of help via tackles and chips. And I think he's holding his own over there. We just got to cut out the 1 to 2, really ugly losses. And I think that his style of play kind of does lead to some of that, but I think that we can still work on those and that things will get better. I think it is it's important to note, with Fautanu in general, this dude has played 4 career games. Okay. 4 career games, and he's playing at a new position. Got to give him some grace. I'm not saying that you have to think he's an all pro right now, but what he's putting on film, I think is pretty good, even if you're not grading on a curve like that for a young player. And, hopefully Broderick can kind of catch up to that at some point. But I did another guy that I really like watching on film is John Grenard. Just an absolute animal off the edge, man. You have to be really careful about oversetting him. That's been an issue for both of the tackles. He loves to go inside track. He'll spin. Ivan Pace, their linebacker, we talked about a little bit of the blitz stuff, especially on early downs. That dude is a heat-seeking missile. He's not always going to be in the right spot. Sometimes he's in the wrong gap. Sometimes he bites on a play-action fake that he doesn't even see coming. He doesn't care. That dude's going to play a million miles an hour no matter what. But just as a team, they play really, really fast. And I think when you're playing this much zone coverage, you kind of have to do that, this style of play. But they play really well as a team is the best way I could put it. But some of that aggressive nature, that aggressive style of play is they do miss tackles. They do a good job of getting multiple hats to the ball, but they have missed, I think it's 25 tackles so far this year, according to Pro Football Reference. That was 6th most in the NFL. I kind of got that feeling after I watched 2 games of them, that there were some missed tackles on film. Really, the game that they lost against the Falcons was really due to Bijan and company going outside zone out of the pistol, and just being able to kind of control the game that way. So can the Steelers control the game in the trenches? We don't really have anything to suggest that they'll be able to do that just yet. But, this would, if they were able to do that and come away with a win here, I would be very, very encouraged and honestly ecstatic about that outcome. Just in the secondary, I already kind of talked about the safeties, but the cornerbacks, Isaiah Rodgers, Byron Murphy. Rodgers had an all-time performance last week. Forced a couple fumbles, caught a pick, scored some touchdowns. Rodgers has been a nice little player, man. I thought that he was a nice depth piece for Philly. Brian Flores said, go get me this guy. He's a perfect fit for what I want to do. They brought him in. It seems like it's working pretty well. Byron Murphy on the other side, he's a playmaker, man. He's really twitchy. He's got good click and close ability. He will give up some yards. You isolate him one-on-one. He is a little bit of a smaller dude, so you can kind of get him top shelf a couple times as well. But got to get DK Metcalf going. That was something that I wrote about for SteelersNow.com this week. He's averaging a career low in terms of yards per game right now. He's also like his average depth of target is basically half of what it has been throughout his NFL career. Just got to get him a shot down the field in this one. Just because they're playing too high or clouding his side doesn't mean that you can phase him out of the game plan. Mainly because the Steelers just don't have enough talent offensively to where an opposing team can take him out of the game and they're going to be able to move the ball with any sort of effectiveness. So try to get some stuff rolling. One of the things that I actually really liked on film, which I guess you could probably do this, the Vikings hit I guess it was a corner post. So like some people call that a cop route to Justin Jefferson, like right before the half, I think in week 2, that was against cover 2, I'm pretty sure. So maybe they steal that play. That would be an interesting one. Metcalf actually scored on the same route against the Falcons. I'm like testing my memory here, against the Falcons, I think in 2022 or 2023, like right before the half. Gino put it on. It was like a dot, like 50 yards down the field, but neither here nor there. But there are ways to attack the field down the line. Again, just because they're playing cover 2, you got to try to stretch the field. My money's on Rodgers attempting my prediction here. He's going to attempt at least 2 hole shots down the middle, up the seams, between the safeties in this one. I don't know if they're going to be completed or whether they're going to be picked off, but they're coming for sure because I know that is just like his preference. He likes to work, 4 verticals, find the safety, put a 2-on-1 on him, and try to get that shot down the field. So that's really his preferred way of attacking this type of coverage, and I just think you're going to see it on Sunday. But I know it's a lot of notes, pretty lengthy. I enjoyed watching the Vikings, so I had a lot of thoughts on this one. Just as a reminder, if you guys are fans of the channel, please consider becoming a member to the channel. It's the cost of a small coffee a month. It's $4 a month, no long-term commitment. You get additional perks. You get additional film rooms, extra content over there. The Yins No Ball podcast with John and I, where we talk through our film room observations on a weekly basis. And then again, some other breakdowns. I think I'm going to do maybe I really want to do another college quarterback breakdown. We'll see how these games go tonight, but that may be something that comes next week. I don't know. We'll see. But as always, I'll be back tomorrow to recap the game at some point. Hopefully the Steelers are able to come out victorious in this one, especially with, Ravens, Chiefs later on in the weekend. That game, whoever loses is going to end up being 1-3. If it's Baltimore, the AFC North would be really pretty wide open, to be honest, which is kind of crazy to think about. But that's pretty much all I've got for today. I will holler at you guys very soon. Peace and love.